Is the department planning to close areas of fishing off BC's coast?
What I will say to you is that I believe in marine protected areas we can do both. We can support fishing because that is an economic drive.
You're not answering the question. You can sit here and say, I am going to close areas of fishing and I believe it's in the best interest of Canada, but you can't sit here and just not tell people the truth.
You're trying to bait an answer, and I am telling you,
to get the truth.
We can do both. And
you can
beyond
do
that,
both what?
We
close
can have
areas?
fishing, we can have fishing activity, and we can also promote sustainability.
Are you planning to close areas to fishing on BC's coast?
We can have balance.
Canada's fishing industry is facing serious economic pressure right now, and people in coastal communities are starting to worry about what comes next. Jobs, income, and entire local economies are tied to the water, and now there's growing concern that major changes could shake everything up. What should be a stable industry suddenly feels uncertain, and that uncertainty is hitting hard where it matters most: people's ability to earn a living. This all begins with what sounds like a simple question, but it never seems to get a simple answer. I hear the question clearly: are fishing areas off British Columbia's coast going to be closed?
We're still the basis for what is planned going forward. So my question for you, Minister, is would you like to use this opportunity to apologize to fishermen, their families, and coastal communities and acknowledge that, yes, the government is planning to close areas as BC's coast to fishing? You're not answering the question. You can sit here and say, I am going to close areas of fishing and I believe it's in the best interest of Canada, but you can't sit here and just not tell people the truth, not tell fishermen the truth.
It's a direct yes or no question, but instead of getting clarity, the response keeps drifting back to the same idea: balance. The message stays the same. Conservation and fishing can exist together. But the more that gets repeated, the more it starts to feel like the real answer is staying just out of reach. And after hearing it again, it doesn't sound confusing, it just feels heavy. When a clear question keeps getting redirected instead of answered, people naturally start wondering what's actually being avoided. That uncertainty isn't just frustrating, it affects planning, investment, and confidence across the entire fishing economy.
It's about balance. And
okay,
we can do
that's
both.
fine, but I'm asking you some simple yes or no questions so we can get a framework for what is happening. Yes or no, is the department planning to close areas of fishing off BC's coast as part of the Marine Planning Area Plan? Yes or no?
The officials are going to speak in the next hour, so you're welcome to ask them. What I will say to you is that I believe in marine protected areas we can do both.
The tension really builds during a committee exchange between Aaron Gunn and Joanne Thompson. Gunn pushes directly for clarity, asking whether fishing areas could be closed under marine planning frameworks. It's not a vague question. It's about real access, real jobs, and real money. But again, the response circles back. We can protect oceans and support fisheries. We can do both. The more that line repeats, the more it feels like the core issue isn't being addressed. At some point, it even starts to sound like, are we missing something here?
Aaron Gunn here, Member of Parliament for North Island Powell River. I wanted to show you guys a surreal exchange I had with the Liberal Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, Joanne Thompson, during committee, where she ardently defends the Liberal plan to impose mass closures to fishing grounds off BC's coast.
As the exchange continues, the pressure ramps up. Gunn isn't just asking casually anymore. He's stressing that this isn't about messaging, it's about clear economic implications being put on record. From his point of view, this isn't theoretical at all. There are already draft planning scenarios from Fisheries and Oceans Canada that outline what expanded marine protected areas could look like along British Columbia's coast. And in some of those scenarios, there are serious concerns about reduced fishing access.
What I will say to you is what I said the last time I was here. I believe we can do both. I believe that we can move forward with conservation sustainability.
What do you mean by do both?
At the same time, if you could allow me to finish, at the same time, we support fisheries.
In certain cases, industries like prawn fisheries could see access drop by as much as 30% in specific zones. So when direct questions still don't get direct answers, it stops feeling like careful wording. It starts to feel like something important is being kept just outside of confirmation. Every time the question gets sharper about closures, about access, about economic impact, the response returns to that same line. We can do both. But the reality is there are trade-offs, real ones. When fishing zones shrink or become restricted, the impact, doesn't just disappear, it gets pushed somewhere else.
Mr. The last time we spoke, you accused fishermen of spreading misinformation relating to MPAs and the government's plan to close significant areas of BC's coast to fishing. And yet, we recently learned from Kathy Graham, the DFO Director of Marine Planning and Conservation, that your government is still planning to implement the UN's 30 by 30 framework.
More boats crowd into smaller areas, competition increases, working hours stretch longer, fuel costs rise, and pressure builds on the same fish stocks. Over time, that changes how the entire industry operates, and not always in a way that supports the people doing the work. From that perspective, it doesn't feel like there's no impact. It feels like economic pressure is being shifted around and not necessarily in a fair or sustainable way for fishing communities. And that's where this situation really hits hard, because for the people living it, this isn't abstract policy talk. This is about real income, real jobs, and real survival.
Why don't you just acknowledge on the record that you're planning to close these areas to fishing?
You just don't want to hear what I'm saying. We can have...
You're evading the question, trying to prevent yourself from going on record, acknowledging what everyone knows to be the case, which is large closures are coming to British Columbia's coast over the next few years.
They're dealing with real uncertainty now, and it's hitting the economic core of these communities. Even small changes in access can throw off income planning and long-term survival for businesses that have been passed down through families for generations. So when officials say nothing is being taken away, but at the same time talk about expanding protected areas, that gap between words and reality starts to feel impossible to ignore. Once you look past the formal language and focus on what this actually means on the ground, it gets real fast. If these fishing zones shrink, it doesn't feel like a simple adjustment on paper. It feels like someone quietly shifting the boundaries of your workspace while you're still trying to do your job inside it, and that's exactly what fishermen are worried about. If part of the coastline becomes restricted, the remaining space doesn't suddenly improve. It just gets tighter.
We can do both in marine protected areas, and I certainly will work to ensure both happen.
So I appreciate that your argument that there are no trade-offs in this. I obviously disagree, but what I'm trying to get on the record, because we've had deflections and evasions on this question, is the department planning to close areas of BC's coast to fishing, yes or no?
The same number of boats, the same demand, but now everything is squeezed into a smaller area. Imagine a crowded market being cut in half and everyone's still expected to earn the same income. Nothing about that stays the same. And of course, it changes fast. Less space leads to more competition, and more competition usually means smaller catches per boat. When that happens, costs don't wait quietly in the background. They start stacking up. Fuel, maintenance, time, it all adds pressure, and that pressure hits profits directly.
And do you acknowledge that marine closures have real economic effects?
What I will say to you, which is what I've just said, marine protected areas enable us to have conservation sustainability for the next generation, but also maintain fishing.
Okay, I appreciate
and we can
that,
do both, and it's important that we do both. I'm not able to say more than that to you, so no, I'm not going to answer
So you
the
can't
other
give
question.
a yes or no question?
Because
the
it's
Kathy
about
Graham
balance,
told
sir.
us.
It's about balance, and
Okay,
we can do
that's
both.
fine. But
There's also a concern being discussed that prawn fishermen along the Central Coast could lose up to 30% of their access under certain planning scenarios. Whether that's seen as a worst-case model or an early warning, the impact feels the same to the people involved. 30% isn't minor, it's a serious cut to someone's working area just gone. And once you bring in the human side, it stops being about numbers completely. More time at sea might sound manageable, but in reality it means more hours away from home, more nights on the water, and more fuel burned just to reach the same results. Families don't focus on policy language. They feel the absence when someone isn't home for dinner.
We can support fishing because
But
that
are
is
you
an
planning
economic
closures?
driver.
Are you planning closures, yes or no?
I can answer
That's what
what I
marine
can
planning
answer.
areas are. They're closures.
You can ask
They're
the
not jet
officials
ski
in the
parks
second
or
hour.
people are going water ski. What are they? They're closures by definition.
What I believe is we need to have conservation, sustainability, so the next generation are able to also participate in fisheries. It is our
Look,
goal.
I understand
our
all that. I'm just trying to get a
coastal
simple yes or
communities.
no answer out of you.
You're trying to bait an answer, and I am
I'm just
telling
trying to
you,
get the truth.
we can do both.
So instead of a sudden shock, what develops is something slower and more constant, a steady buildup of pressure. Each season feels a little tighter, a little harder to keep up. You know, it's not dramatic in one moment, but over time it adds up in a serious way. And then there's another layer that doesn't always get as much attention. When activity gets compressed into smaller zones, the impact doesn't disappear, it concentrates. Instead of spreading effort across a wide coastline, it gets packed into tighter areas. That's where a difficult contradiction starts to show up. A strategy designed to protect ecosystems in one place could unintentionally increase stress in another.
This year, a small window opened to allow fishermen like the Chevelles to fish. But that's not always the case. In some years, there are simply not enough salmon to allow the commercial fishery to take place.
Doing it off the Fraser River is, in my opinion, one of the best runs we have along the coast.
The pair are commercial fishermen and fish under a commercial license issued by the Department of Fisheries.
More boats in smaller zones can mean heavier local impact, even if the overall goal is protection. It's not a simple balance, it's a shifting equation, and there's an economic twist tied directly to operations. If boats have to travel farther, stay out longer, and search harder, fuel use goes up. That's just reality. More time at sea means higher operating costs and more strain on equipment. So in trying to reduce impact in one area, there's a risk of increasing costs and pressure somewhere else. That's what some are calling the hidden flaw. Not because anyone intends harm, but because complex systems don't always respond the way they're expected to. And when those systems are tied directly to people's livelihoods, even small miscalculations can turn into serious economic challenges.
What's out there here? Just not biting?
I guess not.
Climate change and habitat loss are a factor, but the federal government also thinks there are too many fishing boats and licenses. By the end of this year, a license buyback program will begin to pay fishermen to leave the industry.
Now step back for a second, and the tone shifts again, because the biggest issue people keep pointing to isn't even the policy itself. It's how questions are being answered or not answered. Simple questions don't get simple replies. A clear yes or no turns into we need balance, and direct concerns get pushed into broader explanations. Over time, that kind of response does something subtle, but powerful. It starts to wear down trust. That's where the frustration really starts to build. Not from just one moment, but from a repeated pattern. You fishermen deserve the truth. That's the line that keeps coming up, and it's not hard to see why. When people feel like they can't get a straight answer about something that directly affects their income, their business, and their future, it stops feeling like a normal disagreement.
Within a marine protected area, we can honor fisheries and we can also protect and conserve for the next generation. It is balance, and I believe in balanced
no
approaches.
fisheries are going to be losing access. You're not going to. The prawns are going to lose 30% of access on the Central Coast as per DFO's draft scenario 2.
It becomes a trust problem, and once that happens, everything else starts to feel bigger and more serious. When you zoom out from all the exchanges and official language, the situation starts to look like a much larger issue. It's not just about fishing zones anymore, it's about who makes the final decisions that shape economic activity along Canada's coastlines. On one side, there are international frameworks like United Nations 30 by 30 targets, encouraging countries to protect large portions of land and ocean. On the other side, there are local industries that have operated in these waters for generations, building businesses, supporting families, and contributing to regional economies. Right in the middle of that tension, a key question keeps coming up. Decisions like this should be made in Canada for Canadians. That idea reflects a core concern. not opposition to conservation, but concern about how decisions are made and whether local economic realities are fully considered.
Balance of what? So a balance of closing areas and still having a, that's the entire point of marine planning areas, is to close, to restrict access for various forms of fishing in various areas. Do you agree that is the point of marine planning areas?
We can circle around this for the rest of the time I have today, but I will answer exactly the same way.
Are you still using draft scenario 2 as the basis for marine planning areas planning framework, as was reported by your Director General, Kathy Graham? Yes or no?
Because when global targets begin shaping local restrictions, it raises a difficult question. Are communities actively part of the decision-making process, or are they adapting after the decisions are already set? That's where this stops being abstract and starts to feel personal. Behind all of this are real fishing families on places like Vancouver Island and across coastal regions. Their work isn't theoretical, it's daily life, built over years and often passed down through generations. For many, fishing isn't just a job, it's a system of income, routine, and long-term planning all tied together. So when access becomes uncertain, it doesn't just feel economic pressure. It feels like instability in something that has been steady for decades. One season, everything is planned, routes, costs, expected catch. The next season, there are discussions about possible restrictions that could change where work can even happen. That kind of uncertainty doesn't stay in the background. It affects every decision, every investment, every risk taken out on the water.
You're welcome to ask these questions to officials in the next hour. I will answer the same way. We need to have balance. We need to maintain conservation sustainability.
So you're considering adopting the UN 30 by 30 framework without closing any areas to any forms of fishing whatsoever.
And when you pull back even further, the gap becomes clearer. On paper, the focus is on balance, sustainability, and long-term outcomes. But on the ground, the focus is on access, income, and maintaining viable operations. That disconnect, that space between policy direction and real-world experience, is where the entire issue sits. Because if policies move in one direction while everyday economic reality moves in another, something doesn't fully line up. And that's why the concern keeps coming back again and again. If decisions are influenced by global commitments, while local voices feel less heard in the process, then it leads to one persistent question: who is actually steering the outcome? And that question doesn't go away easily. It stays right at the center of the conversation. And that's the situation for today on Yesterday Canada. If you want more updates like this, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.